ANC General Secretary Gwede Mantashe has briefed the media on the way forward for its councillors in local governments around the country. It won 161 out of 213 councils in recent elections. Mantashe spelled out the mandate for ANC councillors in those areas it won and also in opposition-led councils.
ANC-led municipality must be model of democratic and accountable government, where services are delivered in a sustainable manner. Our public representatives must redouble their efforts to change the lives of our people for the better. To this end, hard work, responsiveness, accountability will be the criteria against which we judge ANC councillors. Social and economic development will be at the core of our agenda, and all residents will be encouraged to participate meaningfully in matters of governance. We dare not fail the mandate the people have bestowed upon us. In municipalities, we do not govern. Members of the ANC are called upon to constitute an effective and activist opposition. Ours is not to block or delay service delivery, but rather to protect the gains of our revolution and run against any actions to reverse this.
The ANC's Gwede Mantashe speaking a short while ago from the Thuli House, but let's get more on what came out of that briefing. We cross to our reporters Zwandile Mbeje. Mzwai, very good afternoon to you. So Gwede Mantashe saying that the ANC must adapt and that they suffered a major setback in the elections.
A very good afternoon to you, Natasha. Indeed, this is a party that has been going through some very difficult time. An 8% decline in the national elections is not something small. And then that reality has sunk in, and then they seem to be taking it in their stride. As they say, they need to be an effective opposition, an opposition that would be constructive. This is indeed the maturing of democracy. But what we then gathered from the SG was that they realized that a lot more needs to be done. They have said from this weekend, they are going back to the people. They are going back to the people to listen, to say, yes, for a very long time, we have had this love affair. What is happening? You seem to be deserting us. What is it that we are not doing? And the SG said, well, whatever people are saying, they will take it and they will act on it. And as the media briefing was continuing, journalists were posing all sorts of questions. For example, one of the things that is on everybody's lips, as proposed by the Youth League last week, that maybe you need a new direction in leadership in terms of electing a new leadership with an early conference. Whilst the SG said you need to be very careful why you call such a conference to deal with issues early, you must make sure that that conference must not result in even more divisions. So he indeed said it's actually not a bad idea. And then the fact that as the leadership they have taken collective responsibility, it means if people decide otherwise, they should be able to live with it. So it's one of those press conferences where the governing party is really coming to terms with the fact that they've lost key strategic areas. Yes, in the country, they are still the dominant party, but with a reduced majority. And in metros, I can tell you, in fact, everyone knows that there was no outright winner. So you can't take that for granted. The fact that for the past 24 years, rather 22 years, you've been the majority party. You haven't had to deal with these things of coalitions. Now, all of a sudden, you have to try and beg and speak to people, and people reject you. And yeah, it calls for serious self-introspection. So the SG is saying that is exactly what they are going to do as they embark on this process from this weekend.
All right, and Mzwai, I was going to ask you about that early conference that the ANC Youth League has called for, but Mantashe alluded to the fact of collective responsibility, saying that all the negative narrative of the president over the last few few years has impacted on the ANC, and that is what they're looking forward to in discussing a collective responsibility.
Indeed, one of the responses that the SG gave was that because the Youth League is a structure of the ANC and they're raising this issue, they are actually within their rights. So they would actually wait for it to be processed within various structures. He was even saying there are many people talking about that. But, and he said, in fact, he also repeated this message to say, for example, the decision to call, let's say, the elective conference rests with two structures. If let's say 5 provinces of the ANC decide to call an early conference, so it must happen, or the National Executive Committee. You know that the National Executive Committee is the highest decision-making body in between conferences. So if the NEC decides that an early conference is necessary, so it will have to happen. And of course, the issue of a negative narrative against the president. The SG said, well, it's clear that the sustained narrative around Nkandla, around so many issues that indeed impact negatively on the organization, because the president of the ANC, you can't divorce him from the party. So whatever is being said about him in a negative perspective, in fact, going as far as warning the very members of the ANC to say all along people will tend to say things that are negative about the party, but when it comes the time, they may want to go to the people to say, vote for us. And the SG says people don't easily forget. They'd remember that you actually were saying these things about the party. So one of the things he was saying, the SG, is that it's very important as a start that the party must be united. Because if they go to the conference without any unity, they will come back even more divided. And the prospect of the governing party losing the election outright in 2019 is not an impossibility.
All right, Mzwai, thank you very much. Gwede Mantashe live from Lutuli House.